Story 1. Let's introduce the cast of characters and hopefully make things clearer. There's me and my significant other. There is my cousin 1, their significant other, and their 2 children ranging in age from 7-9. My aunt. My other cousin 2. My other cousin 3 and his son who is 18. Cousin 2 and 3 are siblings. We are all 40 and over. All have jobs except for the kids, the 18-year-old and the aunt who is retired. We've decided to plan a family reunion for 4 nights 5 days. Cousin 2 paid $1,500 for the cabin and left the planning and buying of food to me and Cousin 1. Cousin 1 has not helped financially at all. That has left me and my significant other to buy the food, because I knew it would fall on us for several months now. We've been buying food little by little when we buy our groceries. We estimate we will spend close to $1,000 when it's all said and done. We aren't planning elaborate meals, but buying food for 10 people for 11 meals adds up. Cousin 2 is well aware Cousin 1 isn't helping with the food, and that it's just me and my significant other paying. Cousin 2 continually reminds me that we have an 18-year-old man coming and he eats a lot, and that we need to make sure we have enough for him. I explained I bought a package of 40 hamburger patties. Even if all 10 people eat 2 hamburgers apiece, there will 20 hamburger patties left. I also said we're planning on 5 pounds of ground beef for spaghetti and another 5 pounds for chili. There will also be sides like rice or salad or cornbread or garlic bread. I've planned like that for every meal. Plus, there will be bread and peanut butter and jelly and cereal. I can't imagine there won't be leftovers that he can eat if he gets hungry. He's still insisting that's not enough food, and we should buy a couple of rotisserie chickens, and Cousin 3 suggested we buy ramen for his 18-year-old son. Cousin 3 and his son haven't not financially contributed even a penny towards this, nor do they have plans to pay for anything. I'm flatly refusing to buy extra food, and after the 10th text message, I finally told Cousin 2 that since Cousin 3 and his son were getting a free vacation, if the food provided isn't enough, then he can starve. I might have also called them moochers to have the gall to suggest foods that I could buy for them. Update #1. Short recap. We're going to a cabin in the woods for vacation. It's a family trip with extended family. Several cousins, a couple of kids, an aunt, and a significant other. One cousin paid for the cabin and left the planning and buying meals to me and another cousin. The other cousin has not helped buy anything. Literally nothing. We're talking probably close to $1,000 of food bought, and he hasn't paid not 1 penny. Won't Venmo me money, won't buy stuff on his own. Constant excuses. Last night he messaged me and the cousin that paid for the cabin and said he wanted to invite more people. The cousin that paid for the cabin said no, was actually polite about it. I've seen the texts, and the one who hasn't contributed a dime is now flipping out because he was told no. I'm just dumbfounded at this point. I don't have a lot of family left. That's why I was biting my tongue about the ones not paying towards this trip. But I'm just shocked that someone who hasn't contributed a dime to a trip thinks they can invite 4 other people and gets upset when told no. Update #2. I was asked to give an update, and I've gotten a decent following, so here's your update. Our weekend is almost over. The last of the family leaves tomorrow, so I figured now would be a great time to give you guys the update. Well, the cousin that wanted to bring extra people did not bring them, and he actually bought groceries. There was a group list going, and he stopped before he got to the cabin and bought everything that was on the list that hadn't been bought yet. Then 2 days later, we had to make a grocery run for more food. Several people had the munchies, and that was a decent bill, and he paid that. He also helped with the cooking and cleaning, so in my eyes, he pulled his own weight. The cousin that brought his brother and nephew. They spent the entire time high and drunk, but they weren't annoying. So while I personally don't see the point of what they did, I'm not going to complain. Plus, we'd wake up in the morning, and he always made something like cookies or prepped food for the day, and he was great at emptying and refilling the dishwasher. Only one kid came. We had a blast with said kid. My significant other had fun as well. For me, I was pleasantly surprised. I had a great time, and it was really neat to see my aunt and my cousins. From mannerisms to facial features to the one cousin who is covered in fur from head to toe. It's been hard on me since my dad died, and for a reason that would fill a book. I didn't grow up with this side of the family, so I had a great time reconnecting with them. We had a family meeting where we came up with a budget and how much each person needed to contribute to keep this thing going. The plan is to do the same next year. I'm supposed to call tomorrow to see about reserving the cabin for next year. Update #3. We are trying to make this a yearly tradition. We've gotten together the last 2 years, and no one has killed someone, so we're trying for a third time. On a cruise ship, this time ominous music plays. The place we stayed at the last 2 times doesn't have any openings for the next 2 years, so after trying Airbnbs that charge a heck of a lot for a place big enough for us, I finally say screw it, we're looking at cruises. And wouldn't you know, there's a fairly cheap one that aligns with the dates we can go. Somehow it all fell on me to organize it. And it's like herding cats. I need specific info from each person going, and we're up to 10 people, and group emails and texts go unanswered, so I have to individually harass each person to get very basic info like birth dates, full names, and email addresses. Finally gave an ultimatum that worked. Give me your info today or you're not going. And finally, miraculously, I got everyone's info. I'm so impressed with myself, I'm going to reward myself with a nice margarita tonight, or maybe something stronger. We've divided the cabins by household units. If you live with someone or are a direct family member, such as a child of someone, you'll be assigned to the same cabin. And this is the part you guys are waiting for. The entitled person aspect to this, and why I decided to give this update. I chose the cheapest cabins for all but one cabin. The more expensive cabin will entirely be paid for by the people occupying it. One of the cheap cabins may not get to go. No one else is footing the bill. Those 2 people occupying it are responsible for their portion. If they can't pay, they don't go and no one else is penalized. They know this. They have 10 months to come up with the price of their cabin. It will be a struggle. The struggle is entirely due to poor financial management. One of the persons in the cabin who may not get to go is asking to switch roommates and cabins with the more expensive cabin. The same person that did not contribute anything to the last reunion. Not even cleaning up, cooking, organizing. Nada. And they think they are going to weasel their way into a free cruise. Not gonna happen. Edit. I'll keep giving updates as long as people want to hear about my crazy family. I imagine I won't have another update until the final payment is due, and that's not till August. Update #4. I have a surprising amount of followers, and I promised to update once the cruise had to be paid for, and so here we are. It's going to be a short update because we haven't gone on the cruise yet. Once we get back from the cruise, I'll update again. And yes, I read the criticism about using numbers rather than fake names, so I'll just be vaguer and not mention numbers. It was a mess getting all the info needed to book the cabins, but we did. The entitled aunt tried to switch rooms with someone else who has a suite, while only paying the inside cabin rate. That was shot down immediately. One cabin fell through, so those 2 will not be joining us. There was a breakup, and then the other person couldn't afford to pay for the cruise. Everyone else is paid for, and everyone paid for their own cabin. It did come down to literally the last moment. I expected the entitled aunt to have to drop out, but she somehow found the money. All but one cabin has bought the drink package. The cabin that can't afford to buy the drink package thinks they can buy wine, pour it out, and fill it with something stronger. We shall see if that is smuggled on board. Feel free to take bets on that. Another cabin wants to smuggle pot on board, even though they are well aware of the drug dogs at the port. That cabin plans to vacuum seal it. Feel free to take bets on if that cabin gets caught. My cabin will get on that ship, whether the others do or not, and I plan to spend the majority of the cruise drunk if the others do actually make it on board. Thinking of getting everyone Yeti cups, or maybe a tote bag with some sort of phrase to commemorate this year's family vacation. Update #5. You know that phrase, you're a glutton for punishment? Well, yeah, that's me. So one thing I purposely failed to mention in my other posts is that I have another vacation planned for my significant other, and right before we go on this cruise. As we come home, we have about enough time to wash clothes and repack before we have to leave to go on the cruise. Oh, and didn't I mention the first vacation is overseas, so it takes a bit more planning than US vacation. We leave in a few days for that vacation. I'm also still working 45+ hours a week up until the day we leave, so I don't have a lot of time to devote to the cruise. I've made that clear to everyone going on the cruise. Since we're a bit less than a month from the cruise, we can check in, and I'm trying to coordinate that with everyone and having a tough time doing that. Texts go unanswered. I'm to the point I simply don't care any longer. I checked my significant other and I in, and that's it. I have spent a week trying to coordinate times since we are supposed to carpool there. But I'm done trying to get people to answer my fucking text. And here's where you guys that have read this far are looking for. The juicy stuff. The drama stuff. Back when we planned this cruise, everyone told me they had a passport. I thought that was the end of that. I didn't think I needed to investigate further into that. Unfortunately, I should have. So I explained to one how to check in online and mentioned having your passport handy so you can enter that info. Said person then takes that moment to inform me that their passport is expired. They also have no clue where their birth certificate is. At this point, said person may not be getting on the cruise. Luckily for them, they live in the state they were born in, and the state capital is just a few hours from their home. So I sent them a link to set up an appointment in person to get their birth certificate. I have not followed up with them to find out if they made the appointment or found their birth certificate. I'm officially done for this year trying to corral everything. I have gone above and beyond for a freaking year now, and I have no fucks left to give. Who wants to take bets on if the one with the expired passport gets on the ship? Update #6. Last I left you guys, my significant other and I were gearing up for an overseas trip, coming home, and then almost immediately going on this family cruise. Well, we are back from both, so now it's time for the update. Our trip overseas was amazing. We got to spend time at a hotel that has amazing views of Mount Fuji, and we stayed at a ryokan with our own private hot spring. Absolutely amazing and picture perfect, and we will be going back. We got home. I had about enough time to wash clothes and repack before we got on the boat. So all of us live in the same state, some closer than others. The ones that live about 10 hours away started out Tuesday and spent the night in my town so we could carpool to the cruise terminal. The ones that live about 5 hours away decided to drive down the day of. They headed out about 4 on Thanksgiving Day and met us at a place open Thanksgiving Day. And that's when they dropped the bomb on us. One of the persons in their party did not remember to pack their passport, and they didn't have their birth certificate. Yes, it is the same group that I mentioned before whose passport was expired. Same group, different person. That person, miraculously, found their birth certificate, so they were golden. We drive down to the cruise terminal, help everyone with their luggage, and boy, was there a lot of luggage. And one went to ask about the whole passport situation. He came back to let us know that the person that forgot their passport absolutely would not be allowed on the cruise. Said person had every opportunity to upload their passport ahead of time, and had they done that they would have been allowed to sail. But nope, said person did not do it. So we watched 2 from our group board the bus back to the parking lot to retrieve their vehicle and head home. No temper tantrums, no blaming me, at least not yet. They are trying to get future cruise credit for their missed cruise, but it's not looking good. The rest of us got on the ship, and that's where the fun began. All of us have been on cruises before, so we knew what to expect, but nothing prepared us for this trip. This was a 5-day cruise on a small older ship that wasn't laid out very well, especially in a post-COVID world. People had no concept of personal space anywhere. Not on the elevators, not in line for the buffet, not in line for coffee, not sitting at a table. They also had no concept of cleaning up after themselves or even flushing a friggin' toilet. plates of half-eaten food in the stairwells next to the art pieces, half-drunk drinks all over the railings, dirty tissues in the elevators. People, adults and kids, not covering their mouths when they sneeze or cough. Had a kid that looked to be about 7 cough directly on my arm, and mom didn't apologize or even say anything to her heathen. Watched a lady smack the absolute crap out of another lady right by the service desk, and they did nothing. For a moment I thought we were at Walmart. This was not the experience any of us has had on past cruises, so it was a total surprise to us. And on to only a bit of family drama that actually made it on the ship. The one cousin that planned to bring edibles did apparently bring them and decided to eat 1 or 2 gummies, and also literally drink all night long and into the morning of embarkation, while not sleeping the last night we were on the ship. Made for a not pleasant embarkation trying to track his ass down to get off the ship. And I'm already planning the next family cruise. Hopefully people will be more prepared for the next cruise. Update #7. So I want to clear a few things up since my posts make it to update group and people there have questions. Yes, I address my followers because, surprisingly, I have 529 followers as of right now. And as long as people want to know, I don't mind letting you guys see a glimpse into my life. And yep, I'm just as shocked as some of you that people are following my crazy family. Y'all really should let me tell you about the other side of my family. That one's got murderers and all. It's a lot more interesting than this side of my family. Now on to money questions. My significant other and I don't have kids and we're a bit older, so we have a lot of disposable income. When I bitch about paying for others, it's because those people feel entitled to my and others' money. Those people have always been like that, and I don't play into their games. They are not rich, and I always take that into consideration before booking any family vacation, but they truly feel they are entitled to go and not pay. It's not a question of being too poor to go and everything to do with making poor financial decisions and expecting others to pay for their vacation. When we did the cabin, I was perfectly okay with paying a larger share of the food if the ones that didn't pay anything contributed in other ways, like cooking or cleaning. They didn't. They either sat on their rear end complaining they needed a money tree or drank themselves drunk the entire time. When I would say, "Hey, I need you to make this," and literally hand them everything they needed to make it, they would feign ignorance, and then proceeded to purposely fuck up the food I gave them in hopes of getting out of future things. I don't play those games. That's why we decided a cruise for Thanksgiving. That way everyone paid their fair share. The 2 people who aren't as flush with money were asked before I booked if they could afford it. They both said yes, and they were given 9 months to come up with less than $500 apiece. Well, no, that's incorrect. They had 9 months to come up with $125 altogether. One conveniently left out that they had booked a cruise for after our cabin family vacation. Yes, the same vacation said person said they couldn't afford to help pay for. They paid $1,200 for the cruise, and then couldn't go, so they had a credit with the cruise line that covered 2 people's cruise minus taxes and port fees, that $125 figure. Yes, there is a discrepancy in how much was paid and what they owed. You, apparently, can't use future cruise credit for port fees and taxes. They did struggle to come up with the $125, but again it was because of poor financial choices. They aren't required to come, and I do talk to them before booking anything to make sure they can afford it. I don't just assume they can and book it. I ask, I go over the details, and once I get a yes, then I proceed. Also, because some people didn't know this, cruises can be cheap. We booked inside cabins, and for 2 people for 5 days, it was $500 per person, so about $100 a day. That includes meals. There were some questions about my private vacations that don't include my family. We book years in advance. Years. 2024 and 2025 are already booked, and if my significant other would let me, I'd have booked 2026 too. There was 5 days between when we landed back home and when we had to be on the cruise ship. And in that time frame, my significant other and I still had to work 3 of those days. I also work 9-10 hours days and have about a 3-hour round-trip commute each day. That's what I meant when I said we only had about enough time to wash clothes and repack. We are able to get decent deals on our vacations because we book far in advance. Japan cost us about 10 grand altogether for 2 weeks including airfare. We started in Tokyo and made our way across the country. We went to Kyoto, Takayama, we got to see Mount Fuji, Hiroshima, and just so many awesome things. For that we hired an excellent travel agent who got us great deals on hotels, attractions, and tour guides. Now on to the sorta update. One person told me that financially they are struggling and couldn't afford a family vacation, and I believe them. So I suggested we go up to where they live this year. That saves them from hotel rooms and gas, and then they only have to come up with activities and meals. They agreed, said that was an excellent idea. I then spoke to the others, and they flatly refused the idea. They want a cruise. Cruise doesn't work for 2 of the people, and I told them that. Their response is that 2 poorest people shouldn't dictate the rest. I disagree. I have no issue working around people's finances so that we can include everyone. So we're at an impasse. I gave everyone till January 15th to figure out what we were doing, and that deadline came and went with no communication. So I booked a second vacation for my significant other and I for Christmas. We've now used up all of our vacation time, and I have nothing left over for the family vacation. In the last 2 weeks, the one that flatly refused anything but a cruise is trying to figure out something. They've suggested going to Vegas or Louisiana or Biloxi. I've said each time that they need to speak to the one who told me they couldn't afford it and see what they say first. I'm not helping or planning anything. So that's where we stand now. It does not look promising for a family vacation this year at all. But if it miraculously happens, I will gladly update you guys. If you want an update. Story 2. I regretfully got an apartment with what is, in my opinion, the worst landlord ever. This man has the audacity to call himself a good person in court. Let me fill you in. I got an apartment shortly after being released from prison, happy that someone is going to give me a chance to improve my life. This was clearly not the case. All was well for the first few months, then winter hit and the heat went out. It took 3 days to get him to even answer his phone. By that time his voicemail was full of complaints from his freezing cold tenants. He told me the law gave him reasonable time to fix it. We went 2 more weeks with no heat using our stoves and camping in the kitchen in our respective apartments. When he got his electricity bill, he attempted to raise the rent on the apartments. Obviously he was not allowed by the city, so he refused to pay his electricity bill, thus denying all of us heat at all. This is where my OCD kicked in, and I went full research mode. I studied every law in regards to federal, state, and city landlord-tenant laws and rights. I found so many violations it was no longer funny but scary. I studied building code, I studied the condition of all of his apartments. This was easier due to the fact I was either friends with his tenants or had gone there to repair damages caused by frozen pipes and electrical outlets, failing due to shoddy wiring and so forth. The landlord had pissed off all of his tenants. Every last one was pissed to the point where they wanted to testify against him in court, but couldn't due to the financial hardships the living conditions we were in had been causing. I formulated a plan to get him to repair the buildings he owned. But he had his own plan. January 2nd at 2 a.m., I was awoken by the smoke detectors in the whole building going off. I quickly ran to the back hall because no smoke was in my apartment yet, but I was on the top floor. I opened the door and was greeted by a thick wall of smoke. I quickly ran downstairs after shouting for my girlfriend at the time to get out of the house quickly. I pounded on every door and screamed fire. I got as many people as possible to evacuate, but the floor with the fire no one was answering, and to my knowledge contained children. So I panicked. At this point the fire department was there and began breaking in doors. I evacuated. After the fire was out and the investigation had started, I witnessed the landlord give the tenant of that apartment's sister an envelope containing an undisclosed amount of cash, which was visible to anyone nearby. 2 weeks later the results were released. Arson. The tenant had used hairspray to start the fire and hid the evidence in a hole she punched into the wall. The very person who had been given money by the landlord. Ironically, she was the only tenant who had paid rent in the whole building, because she had started moving in 2 days prior. I had not known she was now a tenant and her sister and kids had moved out the day before. I looked at him and told him I know what he had done, and I was not going to rest until he lost all his buildings. I then began asking his tenants for their stories about their interaction with the landlord. This is where things got real. He had been accused of everything from ripping off employees, theft, grand theft auto, bank fraud, and so much more. I formulated a new plan. I sucked up to him and made it known I am a computer tech. The landlord had a few broken computers and some printer and network issues. I was in. We worked a deal on payment for back rent. I knew he was not good for his word, but it was all part of the plan. Once I got his passwords and logins, I copied his entire hard disk drive to my portable one. I copied all emails in his business account and printed his financial records on my Wi-Fi printer, which was next door. After I fixed his computers and network, I then went home to review my newfound evidence. It was enough. More than enough. I contacted code enforcement with all of the violations of code for every building, including the illegal electrical installation in his new office without permits or even an electrician. He was immediately investigated. That night, I found a 7-day notice to quit on my door. My roommate was worried, but I filled him in on the plan. Remember, I studied all those laws and rights. Well, we get to court and I open with Your Honor, I have proof of a clear violation of the Warranty of Habitability Act. The eviction was thrown out and he was forced to repair my apartment with me still in it immediately. The next month I was given another eviction notice. Still, he is losing money due to the fact I was teaching his tenants landlord-tenant rights and the laws associated with it. The jerk kept losing his court dates and kept being told to fix stuff and was continuously fined by the courts and the code enforcement. He was sinking fast. Back to that fire, the woman living there was arrested for arson and charged with 2 counts due to the accidental electrical fire on New Year's Day that turned out to be ruled intentionally. So the hairspray was in reality attempt 2. He was under investigation for conspiracy to arson and other charges. I wasn't done yet. We went to court again for my non-payment of rent. I won again based on the Landlord's Retaliation Act because I had contacted code enforcement and could prove this blatant retaliation, and the judge didn't even listen to him. Needless to say, spending the winter without heat took a toll on us tenants. We bought electric heaters and informed the power company that the landlord had shut off all the power to all his buildings and was requiring the tenants to pay for their own power. Well, apparently his illegal wiring caught up to him. He had wired apartments to run off each other, and the common areas were now attached to wiring in every apartment. This put the landlord in a rough position, as local law says it's the landlord's responsibility to supply power to all common areas. This means his shoddy workmanship and illegal wiring prevents him from legally disconnecting the power. The power company turned on all the power and locked his ability to shut it off until the wiring of common areas was repaired and separated from the apartments. This would cost thousands. Thousands we knew he didn't have. The landlord was panicking. He kept losing in court. People were legally withholding rent. He couldn't shut off services, and the fines were debilitating. He kept blaming his tenants and refused to repair things. One by one, the buildings were condemned, and the landlord was required to pay for relocation of his tenants by law. Well, he didn't. He couldn't. He was arrested for attempting to sell 3 buildings the city confiscated from him and for selling one that was condemned. The landlord got what he deserved. He lost every building he owned, got charged with all kinds of fraud, and was investigated for other crimes I am still unaware of. But I wasn't done. He caused a lot of suffering. I gave his financial records to the IRS, Internal Revenue Service, with all the internal memos and everything I got from his computers. Also, I provided the local authorities and code enforcement with the same things. The landlord was so screwed. I have since gotten a new apartment, and everything he owned has been taken by the city, state, and IRS. I have not seen the landlord in 3 years, and all of his properties have been bought by someone new, repaired, and have all new tenants who are happy with their new landlords. The old tenants got better places with decent landlords. And what about our wonderful entitled landlord? He is serving multiple sentences for the crimes he has committed, and is already not getting out anytime soon, yet the investigations are not done and the charges keep coming. The landlord is somewhere in some prison regretting meeting this tenant. Moral? Don't be entitled unless you want to meet the moral enforcer. Story 3. A colleague at work sits just 5 feet from me and creates a significant amount of noise. He engages in loud phone conversations and repeatedly tells the same joke at maximum volume to anyone who enters the shared workspace. It's difficult to concentrate with the constant commotion, but I can't complain because his supervisor and I have a long-standing issue, and I don't want to create additional tension. As a result, I've been staying late to complete my tasks. His chair is old and damaged, with chipped and stuck wheels, but he adores it because it emits a piercing screech whenever he swivels. Unfortunately, I find the sound physically uncomfortable. One evening, while walking through the office, I noticed an unclaimed, brand new chair, a rare commodity in our workplace. I decided to switch his noisy chair with this new one, leaving his old chair at an empty desk nearby. The next morning, he arrived, sat down, and discovered that his chair no longer squeaked, and the wheels moved smoothly. He was furious, loudly demanding to know, "Who took my chair?" The irony was that his original chair was in plain sight, just a few feet away. He retrieved his chair and spent the entire day deliberately swiveling back and forth to produce as much noise as possible. At lunchtime, I went to a nearby hardware store and purchased a small can of lubricant spray. That evening, I applied the spray to the chair's stem, ensuring I wiped away any excess to prevent it from staining his suit. I also lubricated the wheels, making sure they spun freely while keeping the exterior clean. The following morning, he sat down and immediately tried to recreate the squeak by shifting back and forth. To his astonishment, the chair was silent and moved effortlessly. He seemed bewildered, standing up to inspect it, only to confirm it was indeed his chair. He repeated the process several times, looking increasingly puzzled. Then, as he pushed back, the chair glided smoothly across the floor, causing him to collide with the replacement chair I had offered the previous day. Over the next several weeks, he would repeatedly grind the chair in an attempt to make it squeal again. Each time it started to make noise, I would reapply the lubricant that evening. This cycle continued for months. Finally, one morning, after a particularly vigorous attempt to elicit a squeak, the chair's stem snapped, sending him tumbling to the floor. I had to bite my hand to stifle my laughter. In the end, he was left with no choice but to use the new chair I had provided from the start.